Officer Brady and his rookie partner Lenny cruised through the bustling city streets in their patrol car, the hum of the engine and the intermittent chirps of the police radio filling the air. Inside the vehicle, the atmosphere was charged with an undercurrent of tension. Brady, a seasoned officer with years of service, was amid a fervent diatribe about the recent changes in the police department's leadership. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Can you believe they put one of them in charge? Brady spat out with barely concealed disgust, his knuckles gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his fingers had turned a ghostly white. This department's going to hell in a handbasket. I've seen a lot in my time, but this is just the latest in a long line of ridiculous decisions. Lenny, the rookie who had joined the force only a few months ago, shifted uncomfortably in his seat beside Brady. Despite his limited experience, Lenny was already feeling the weight of Brady's overtly prejudiced views. The older officer's blatant racism made him increasingly uneasy, and he struggled with how to respond without causing more friction. Maybe we should give the new captain a chance, Lenny suggested cautiously, his voice hesitant. He knew that stepping into a confrontation with Brady could be problematic, but he felt compelled to voice a more hopeful perspective. Brady let out a harsh, dismissive laugh. "You're too naive, kid. They're all the same. You can't trust them. It's not about giving people a chance. It's about knowing the patterns, and this department's full of them." As they turned onto Main Street, Brady's gaze sharpened. His attention was immediately drawn to a sleek, black sedan gliding smoothly along the road. The driver, a well-dressed black man, was adhering to every traffic law with precision, his behavior impeccable. However, Brady's instinctive suspicion flared up, and something about the scene triggered his unease. "Look at that," Brady muttered under his breath, a sneer curling at the edge of his lips. "Bet he stole that car. Who else would drive something like that around here?" Lenny's frown deepened as he considered the situation. "We don't know that, sir. He's not doing anything wrong. His driving is perfectly legal." Brady's disdain was palpable as he retorted, "That's what you think, but sometimes you have to look beyond the surface. This is just the kind of routine check we need." Without further ado, he flipped on the patrol car's lights, the sudden flash cutting through the evening gloom. "Time for a little routine check," he declared, the authority in his voice making it clear that this was not a matter open to discussion. The black sedan eased to a stop on the side of the road with smooth, practiced precision. Lenny watched as the driver's shoulders visibly tensed at the sight of Brady stepping out of the patrol car. The atmosphere in the vehicle was heavy with unspoken discomfort, and Lenny's internal conflict grew as he tried to gauge the situation. "Sir, please," Lenny said quietly, his voice edged with concern. "This doesn't feel right. Maybe we should reconsider this." Brady, however, seemed oblivious to Lenny's discomfort. He strolled toward the sedan with a confident, almost mocking stride, a smirk playing on his lips. Lenny felt a gnawing anxiety in his stomach as he followed, his steps reluctant and his mind racing with unease. As they reached the vehicle, the driver's window descended with a soft whir. The man inside appeared calm but cautious, his eyes shifting between Brady and Lenny. There was a palpable tension in the air as he regarded the officers. "Is there a problem, officers?" the driver inquired, his voice steady but carrying an edge of apprehension. Brady leaned in, his face dangerously close to the driver's, the smirk on his face growing more pronounced. "License and registration," he demanded, his voice dripping with contempt. Without hesitation, the driver produced the requested documents and handed them over with a barely perceptible tremble in his hands. Lenny noticed the slight quiver, a subtle sign of the driver's nervousness, but Brady seemed to revel in the power dynamics at play. DeAndre Johnson, Brady read aloud, his lip curling in disdain as he scrutinized the name on the documents. "And what brings you to this neighborhood, Mr. Johnson?" "I'm on my way to a meeting," DeAndre responded evenly, his voice betraying no hint of agitation. Barbrady's eyes narrowed as he scrutinized DeAndre with growing suspicion. "Is there a reason you pulled me over?" DeAndre's question was met with an icy glare. "We ask the questions here," Barbrady snapped, his tone authoritative and unyielding. "Step out of the vehicle." The command was abrupt and commanding, leaving little room for negotiation. The scene was set, with Barbrady's determination to assert control clashing against the driver's wary compliance. DeAndre hesitated, his gaze flickering to Lenny, who avoided his eyes, clearly uncomfortable and filled with a sense of shame. The air was heavy with unspoken tension as DeAndre slowly opened the car door and stepped out onto the pavement. Lenny felt the pressure mounting, an uncomfortable knot forming in his stomach. He was acutely aware that the situation was deteriorating, but he felt paralyzed, unsure of how to intervene or halt the escalating drama. As Barbrady began his aggressive questioning, Lenny's mind raced furiously, desperately trying to devise a strategy to de-escalate the situation before it spiraled completely out of control. The routine traffic stop, which had initially seemed like a mere inconvenience, was quickly morphing into a pivotal moment that would irrevocably alter their lives. Barbrady, embodying the demeanor of a predator on the hunt, prowled around DeAndre's car with an unsettling, almost menacing gait. His scrutinizing eyes were locked onto the vehicle, meticulously searching for any minor infraction or reason to intensify his approach. The intensity of his scrutiny seemed to amplify with each passing second. "Nice car you got here, Mr. Johnson." Barbrady's voice dripped with condescension and disdain. "Tell me, how does someone like you manage to afford such a luxury?" DeAndre inhaled deeply, striving to maintain a semblance of calm and composure in the face of Barbrady's overt hostility. "I work hard for my money, officer," he replied with measured calmness. "I'm en route to an important business meeting. Could you please clarify the reason for this stop?" Barbrady's response was dismissive as he continued to disregard DeAndre's question. His hand rested menacingly on his holster, a clear indication of his readiness to escalate the encounter. "Mind if we take a look inside your vehicle?" DeAndre's eyes narrowed, his resolve hardening. "I do mind," he said firmly, his voice steady. "I haven't committed any offense, and I do not consent to a search." Barbrady's expression contorted into a snarl of anger and suspicion. "Oh, so you've got something to hide, do you?" Before DeAndre could react further, Barbrady abruptly yanked open the car door, initiating a frenzied search of the interior. DeAndre moved forward, intent on protesting this breach of his rights, but Lenny, driven by a sense of urgency and anxiety, swiftly positioned himself between DeAndre and Barbrady. "Sir, please stay back." Lenny's voice wavered with a mix of fear and determination as he attempted to assert some control over the situation. As Barbrady searched the vehicle with a seemingly routine air, his movements were anything but casual. With a practiced flick of his wrist, he discreetly retrieved a small, clear bag of white powder from the inner pocket of his jacket. Without a hint of hesitation, he slid the bag beneath the driver's seat, masking his actions under the guise of a thorough search. Lenny, stationed a few paces away, caught a fleeting glimpse of the subtle maneuver from the corner of his eye. A surge of panic gripped his chest as he processed the gravity of the situation. What was unfolding before him went beyond mere racial profiling. It was a deliberate, malicious setup designed to implicate someone unjustly. His heart pounded furiously, knowing that he was witnessing a betrayal of everything he had been taught to stand for. Emerging from the vehicle with a triumphant smirk, Barbrady brandished the small bag with an air of self-satisfaction. Well, he declared with a tone of mock grandeur, "What do we have here?" His voice dripped with false authority as he presented the bag, as if it were the culmination of a grand discovery. DeAndre's eyes widened in disbelief, his face a mask of shock and indignation. "That's not mine. You just planted that in my car," he protested, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. Barbrady's smirk widened into a cruel grin. "Looks like we've got ourselves a drug dealer," he declared, his tone devoid of empathy. "You're under arrest." As Barbrady reached for his handcuffs with a calculated sense of finality, DeAndre's previously composed demeanor shattered. "This is absurd," he exclaimed, his voice rising with frustration. "I'm telling you, that's not mine. This is a setup." Lenny's stomach churned with nausea. The scene before him was a stark, undeniable abuse of authority and injustice that he knew was both morally and legally reprehensible. The echo of his father's teachings rang in his mind, a poignant reminder of the true essence of law enforcement. "A true officer protects and serves all people," son, his father had said, "not just the ones who look like us." The atmosphere was charged with a palpable tension, as if the very air around them was thick with the weight of the unfolding injustice. DeAndre, fully aware of the severity of the situation, turned to Lenny with desperate, pleading eyes. "Officer, you saw what happened. Tell him this isn't right. You have to stand up for the truth." Barbrady's gaze snapped to Lenny, his expression a mixture of irritation and menace. "Don't listen to him, rookie," he snapped. "This is how we clean up the streets. Sometimes you have to bend the rules to get results." His voice carried a dismissive tone, clearly intent on shutting down any challenge to his fabricated narrative. Lenny stood frozen, caught in the agonizing dilemma of choosing between his duty to his partner and his deep-seated moral obligation to uphold justice. The gravity of the moment was almost palpable, bearing down on him with a crushing intensity that made his decision feel like it would irrevocably alter not only the trajectory of his career but also his very life. As Officer Barbrady prepared to handcuff DeAndre, the atmosphere crackled with tension, the situation precariously balanced on the brink of explosive conflict. The coming moments held the power to decide whether justice would be served or if an innocent man's life would be irreparably marred by the unchecked forces of prejudice and corruption. Time seemed to stretch and distort as Lenny's gaze fixed on Barbrady's outstretched hand reaching for the handcuffs. In that suspended moment, a torrent of memories surged through his mind, his father's beaming pride at his graduation from the police academy, the countless tales of honor and integrity that had shaped his values, and the solemn oath he had taken to protect and serve with unwavering commitment. "Stop!" Lenny's voice cut through the charged air, the commanding tone surprising even himself with its unexpected authority. Barbrady halted abruptly, his hand suspended midway to DeAndre's wrist. "What did you say, rookie?" His voice held a mix of incredulity and annoyance. Lenny stepped forward decisively, placing himself squarely between his partner and DeAndre. His heart pounded fiercely against his ribcage, but with each beat, his resolve hardened. "I said stop, Officer Barbrady. This isn't right, and you know it." Barbrady's expression twisted into a snarl of anger. "You listen here, you little punk. I've been on this force longer than you've been alive. You don't get to tell me what's right or wrong." "Maybe not," Lenny countered, his voice steady and firm, "but I know what I saw. You planted that evidence. This man is innocent." DeAndre, though still visibly tense, now harbored a flicker of hope in his eyes as he observed the confrontation. Barbrady's voice dropped to a threatening growl, filled with dark menace. "You're making a colossal mistake, kid. I can end your career right here, right now. Is that what you want?" For a fleeting moment, doubt crept into Lenny's mind. His lifelong dream had always been to become a police officer, to serve and make a difference in the world. He wondered if he was prepared to jeopardize that dream over this confrontation. Yet, as he gazed at DeAndre, seeing the fear and desperation etched into his face, Lenny felt a surge of resolve, He knew he couldn't back down now. If standing up for what's right means losing my job, then so be it, Lenny thought with firm determination. I won't be complicit in this. Barbrady's face turned a deep shade of red with fury. With a burst of rage, he jabbed a finger into Lenny's chest, his voice a harsh growl. You're done, you hear me? Done. I'll make sure you never wear a badge again. You'll be out of this department before you know it. Despite the anger directed at him, Lenny remained resolute. He squared his shoulders, his voice steady and unwavering. Go ahead, but I'm not moving, and you're not arresting this man on false charges. The tension between the two officers was almost tangible, crackling in the air around them. DeAndre, recognizing a possible chance to defuse the escalating situation, tried to interject. Officers, please. There's no need for this to escalate. We can resolve this peacefully. Barbrady roared back at DeAndre, his voice filled with contempt. Shut your mouth. You don't get to talk here. But Lenny had found his courage and was determined to stand his ground. He placed a hand firmly on Barbrady's shoulder, pulling him back in an attempt to de-escalate the situation. That's enough. He has rights, and you're violating them. The older officer, seething with anger, shoved Lenny's hand away with a violent motion. You're making the biggest mistake of your life, kid. Don't think I won't report this insubordination. Lenny stood tall, his resolve unwavering. His father's words of wisdom echoed in his mind, giving him strength. Report away. I'd rather lose my job than lose my integrity. As the two officers faced off, the contrast between Barbrady's rage and Lenny's steadfastness highlighted the gravity of the moment. The potential for personal and professional repercussions loomed large, but Lenny was prepared to face them for the sake of justice and honor. As the confrontation escalated, the reality of the situation began to dawn on them. This single traffic stop was about to ignite a series of events that would extend far beyond their immediate interactions. Unbeknownst to them, this moment of tension was poised to become a pivotal turning point, triggering a profound transformation within their police department and the broader community. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, each individual caught in a high-stakes standoff. Barbrady's aggressive stance, Lenny's anxious determination, and DeAndre's resolute calm created a volatile mix that captured the attention of onlookers. Passing motorists slowed to gawk at the unfolding drama, their curiosity adding to the growing spectacle on the roadside. Feeling cornered and recognizing the gravity of the situation, DeAndre resolved to take a calculated risk. His voice, though steady and commanding, carried an undertone of urgency. Officers, he addressed both Barbrady and Lenny with deliberate clarity. There's something crucial that you both need to understand. Barbrady's face twisted into a mocking sneer. Save your speeches for the judge, he retorted dismissively. Undeterred, DeAndre pressed forward, his words cutting through the tension like a knife. I am Captain DeAndre Johnson, the newly appointed head of this precinct. The declaration hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. The impact of DeAndre's revelation was immediate and profound. Barbrady's complexion paled, his arrogance dissolving into a mix of shock and apprehension. Lenny's eyes widened in stunned disbelief, struggling to process the unexpected turn of events. That's impossible, Barbrady stammered, his voice betraying his surprise. I had no idea. DeAndre nodded, his expression serious yet composed. That's precisely why I chose to observe the department covertly before officially assuming my role. What I've witnessed here today is profoundly troubling. Lenny observed as the gravity of the revelation took hold of Barbrady. The veteran officer's bluster and bravado crumbled, replaced by a palpable sense of fear and dismay. The realization that his actions had been scrutinized by the new head of the precinct was unsettling. I'm sorry, Lenny spoke quietly to DeAndre, his voice tinged with regret. I tried to intervene, but... DeAndre placed a reassuring hand on Lenny's shoulder, his gesture conveying both support and understanding. "It's not your fault, Lenny. Your courage today has been remarkable. We will address this situation and work towards resolving it." As DeAndre took charge of the situation, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Barbrady's earlier air of authority evaporated, replaced by a sense of defeat and vulnerability. The outcome of this crucial encounter would not only determine the future of the precinct, but also potentially influence Lenny's career trajectory. The stakes were now higher than ever, and the path ahead was uncertain, marked by the profound implications of this pivotal moment. The traffic stop, initially intended as a routine check, had rapidly escalated into a critical confrontation, revealing the entrenched corruption and bias within the police department. What began as a simple procedure had morphed into a dramatic incident with far-reaching implications. In the days and weeks that followed, the fallout from this event would send shockwaves through the community, igniting conversations and actions that questioned deep-seated prejudices and systemic injustices. Lenny's bold decision to challenge Barbrady marked the dawn of a transformative journey, not only for himself but for the entire department. This single, pivotal moment set in motion a path fraught with obstacles, yet it promised the possibility of a future characterized by greater integrity and justice. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was one paved with the hope of genuine reform, emerging from the crucible of a profound and pivotal event. As the sirens wailed in the distance, the approach of backup was laden with tension. DeAndre braced himself, recognizing that this situation had transcended a mere traffic stop gone awry. It had become a flashpoint for the community's long-held grievances, a defining moment that would shape the dynamics between the police force and the very people they were sworn to serve and protect. The eyes of the city were fixed upon them, and the unfolding drama was poised to capture the world's attention. The blaring sirens grew louder, their sound cutting through the cacophony of the crowd's chants. Lenny, acutely aware of the volatile nature of the unfolding scene, raced toward the incoming police vehicles, frantically waving his arms to attract their attention. "Over here," he shouted, his voice struggling to rise above the noise and urgency of the moment. As the first patrol car skidded to a halt, its tires screeching on the asphalt, two officers sprang from the vehicle, their hands instinctively moving toward their holsters. They scanned the scene with evident confusion, taking in the sight of the agitated crowd, the cornered Barbrady, and DeAndre standing resolutely at the center of the turmoil. Sergeant Rodriguez, the senior officer of the newly arrived backup, stepped forward, his expression a mixture of authority and bewilderment. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice firm as he sought to understand the gravity of the situation. Breathless and visibly shaken, Lenny began to recount the events. "We've got a situation," he said urgently. "Officer Barbrady conducted an illegal stop and attempted to plant evidence. The man he stopped is Captain Johnson, our new precinct leader." Rodriguez's eyes widened in astonishment, his disbelief evident. "Are you serious?" he asked, struggling to grasp the enormity of the accusation. The realization that the incident involved a high-ranking officer only heightened the tension and underscored the potential for a broader impact on the department and the community at large. Meanwhile, Barbrady, sensing his chance to cover up his wrongdoing slipping away, made a desperate and reckless decision. He lunged towards the bag containing the planted drugs, aiming to destroy the damning evidence of his corruption. "He's going for the drugs," a voice from the crowd shouted, heightening the tension. DeAndre, ever alert to the escalating threat, reacted with the precision and agility honed from years of rigorous training. He darted forward and tackled Barbrady with practiced force, bringing him crashing to the ground and pinning him with determined strength. "Officer Barbrady, you're under arrest," DeAndre declared, his authoritative voice cutting through the now silent crowd. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The crowd erupted in cheers, a wave of approval sweeping over them as Sergeant Rodriguez rushed to the scene to assist with the arrest. Lenny, feeling a profound sense of relief, stepped forward to offer his support. As Barbrady was cuffed and led away to a waiting patrol car, his protests grew louder and more frantic. "This is a setup. You can't do this to me. I've got rights." DeAndre, maintaining a composed demeanor, addressed the gathering of officers and civilians. "Everyone, please remain calm. This situation is now under control. We will be conducting a thorough investigation into the events of today, and I assure you that justice will be served." As the newly arrived officers began to disperse the crowd, news cameras captured every dramatic moment of the unfolding scene. Lenny, his adrenaline finally beginning to wane, approached DeAndre with a sense of purpose. "Sir, I want you to know that I'm prepared to give a full statement about what I witnessed today." DeAndre met Lenny's gaze with a look of deep respect. "Thank you, Officer Thompson. Your integrity in this matter is exactly what this department needs." With the immediate chaos beginning to settle, DeAndre's thoughts turned to his son. He hurried back to his car, opening the back door with a mixture of anxiety and relief. "Marcus, are you okay?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. The boy nodded, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and curiosity. "Dad, what's going to happen now?" DeAndre pulled his son into a tight embrace. "Now we're going to make things right. This is what I've been fighting for, son. This is why my job is so important." As father and son shared a moment of comfort, Sergeant Rodriguez approached with an update. "Captain, the press is asking for a statement, and the commissioner is on his way." DeAndre took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the impending responsibility. He understood that the arrest of Barbrady was merely the beginning of a much larger struggle. The real battle lay ahead in addressing the systemic issues that had plagued the department for too long. With renewed determination, DeAndre glanced at Lenny, then at his son, and finally at the diverse crowd of citizens who watched with expectant eyes. The road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, but for the first time in a long while, there was a glimmer of hope for meaningful change. Reinforcements had arrived not just in the form of additional officers, but through the awakening of a community ready to demand justice. The real work was just beginning, and DeAndre was prepared to lead the charge. As the scene began to stabilize, the oppressive air remained heavy with tension. The blare of sirens cut through the night as the commissioner's car arrived, its lights flashing insistently. Commissioner Holt, a formidable figure in his 60s with a reputation for stern authority, stepped out of the vehicle. His face, etched with lines of worry and frustration, reflected the gravity of the situation unfolding before him. Captain Johnson Holt called out, his voice cutting through the chaos as he approached DeAndre with purposeful strides. His eyes, sharp and scrutinizing, were fixed on DeAndre. "What in God's name is happening here?" DeAndre, standing tall and resolute, met the commissioner's intense gaze without flinching. "Sir, we have a serious situation involving Officer Barbrady. He has conducted an illegal stop and attempted to plant evidence." Holt's eyebrows shot up in surprise, a clear sign of his alarm. "These are very serious allegations, Captain. Do you have any evidence to support these claims?" Before DeAndre could respond, Lenny, who had been standing quietly, stepped forward with a determined demeanor. Despite the palpable tension, his voice was steady. "I do, sir. I witnessed the entire incident unfold. Officer Barbrady deliberately planted drugs in Captain Johnson's vehicle." The commissioner's eyes darted between DeAndre, Lenny, and the patrol car where Officer Barbrady sat, his face a grim mask of both anger and fear. Holt's frustration was evident as he muttered under his breath, "This is turning into a nightmare," before addressing the situation with greater authority. "All right, I need statements from everyone involved immediately, and someone gets those news cameras out of here." However, it was too late. The story was already taking off on social media, spreading like wildfire. Smartphones had captured every moment, and the scene of Bar Brady being escorted from the patrol car was now all over the internet. "This is all a misunderstanding," Bar Brady protested loudly, his composure finally shattering. "You can't possibly believe this. A rookie and a stranger claiming to be a captain are trying to frame me." DeAndre stepped forward with a calm yet authoritative presence, his badge catching the sunlight and emphasizing his role. "I am Captain DeAndre Johnson. I was en route to a meeting with the commissioner when Officer Bar Brady conducted an illegal stop and tried to frame me for drug possession." The crowd, which had momentarily fallen silent in anticipation of the commissioner's arrival, began to buzz with renewed energy. Murmurs of outrage and calls for justice began to ripple through the onlookers. Shouts of "justice" and "lock him up" echoed, reflecting the public's fervent reaction to the unfolding drama. Commissioner Holt raised his hands to command silence, his voice resolute and authoritative. "This situation will be addressed according to protocol. Officer Bar Brady, you are suspended pending a full investigation. Captain Johnson, I expect a comprehensive report on my desk by tomorrow morning." Bar Brady's face twisted in a mixture of rage and desperation. "This is how you're going to treat me, Holt. After all these years, you know how things work on the streets. Sometimes bending the rules is necessary to get results." A profound hush descended upon the crowd. The collective murmur that had once filled the air with fervent demands for Bar Brady's arrest was now replaced by stunned silence. The sudden quiet was palpable, a stark contrast to the clamor that had preceded it. DeAndre moved closer to Bar Brady, his presence commanding attention. His voice, though soft, carried weight in the charged atmosphere. "Bar Brady, the rules are not meant to be manipulated or ignored. They exist to safeguard everyone, including the officers who are entrusted with enforcing them. Your actions today, and over the years, have not only breached the law but have also severely undermined the trust that should exist between the police force and the community we are committed to serving." Encouraged by DeAndre's resolute stance, Lenny found his courage. "Commissioner," he said, addressing the room with newfound resolve, "I am prepared to provide a complete account of today's events, as well as disclose other incidents I have witnessed during my time working with Officer Bar Brady." Bar Brady, his face contorted with fury, lunged towards Lenny. His complexion turned a deep shade of purple as he raged, "You treacherous little rat. I'll make sure you regret this." Several officers quickly intervened, struggling to restrain Bar Brady, who continued to hurl threats and profanities. Commissioner Holt, his expression steely and unyielding, signaled to the officers, "Take him away and ensure he is charged with assaulting an officer, in addition to the other offenses." As Bar Brady was escorted out, still shouting defiantly, DeAndre turned to face the crowd. "I understand that many of you have lost trust in law enforcement. What transpired here today is indefensible, but I make this commitment to you under my leadership. We will actively root out corruption, confront racial biases, and work relentlessly to restore faith within our community." Gradually, the crowd's loud protests began to transform into hesitant applause. It wasn't an enthusiastic endorsement, but it marked the beginning of a tentative reconciliation. As the crowd started to disperse, DeAndre noticed Lenny standing a bit taller, a sense of righteousness and resolve evident in his stance. The path forward would undoubtedly be fraught with challenges, but today's events have proven that meaningful change is within reach, one courageous step at a time. The confrontation had ended, but the true work of overhauling the department and mending the rift with the community was just beginning. The subsequent days were a whirlwind of activity, as the repercussions of Bar Brady's actions rippled through both the police department and the broader community. The incident had unveiled deep-seated systemic problems within the force. Bar Brady, once a swaggering figure of authority, now found himself stripped of his badge and weapon, confined to a holding cell, a stark contrast to the confident officer he had been just days prior. The media frenzy surrounding his arraignment was intense, with demonstrators rallying outside the courthouse, demanding accountability. Inside the courtroom, Barbrady's veneer of righteousness crumbled as the mounting evidence against him became undeniable. Lenny's testimony was particularly damning, offering a detailed account of the attempted cover-up. Yet, it was the subsequent revelations that truly sealed Barbrady's fate. Inspired by Lenny's bravery, other officers stepped forward, sharing their own experiences and exposing a pattern of Barbrady's misconduct, racial profiling, and abuse of power. Each new revelation sent shockwaves through both the department and the community, further unraveling the extent of the corruption that had been allowed to fester for so long. Your Honor, the prosecutor began, addressing the judge with a tone of solemn gravity. What we are presented with is not merely an isolated incident or an unfortunate anomaly. Instead, what we have before us is a deeply troubling pattern of behavior that has systematically eroded the fundamental trust between law enforcement and the very citizens they are sworn to protect. This erosion of trust represents a profound breach of the public's confidence in their guardians. A breach that extends beyond individual misdeeds to a larger, more systemic failure. Barbrady's defense attorney, attempting to mitigate the severity of the situation, portrayed his client as a relic of a bygone era, a cop entrenched in outdated practices, struggling to navigate a world where social norms had evolved. Yet, despite these attempts to frame Barbrady as a victim of time rather than of his actions, the weight of the evidence was indisputable and overwhelming. As the trial advanced, the courtroom was transformed into a stage for a series of raw, impassioned testimonies from community members who had endured the brunt of Barbrady's oppressive tactics. Their stories painted a vivid picture of suffering and fear, further exposing the extent of the damage inflicted under his watch. Amidst the tumult of the trial, DeAndre remained steadfastly focused on his professional responsibilities. The commissioner's mandate had been unequivocal. The department needed a comprehensive overhaul, with the introduction of new training protocols and an urgent effort to collaborate with community leaders to repair the fractured relationship between the police force and the public. This was no small feat. It was a monumental task fraught with complexity and resistance. Nonetheless, DeAndre was unwavering in his resolve. He dedicated long hours to meticulously reviewing department policies, engaging in dialogue with activists, and addressing his officers' concerns. Initially, the internal reforms were met with a degree of skepticism. A faction of officers resisted the new oversight and changes, feeling threatened by the shift in expectations. Others, however, welcomed the reforms, recognizing them as a necessary evolution. DeAndre's leadership approach, characterized by an emphasis on transparency and accountability, began to slowly alter the department's culture. Over time, the community's trust, though tenuous at first, began to be restored. The implementation of public forums, community policing initiatives, and robust oversight mechanisms marked a significant shift in the department's ethos from one of control and authority to one of genuine service and community engagement. This transformation was a gradual process, but the seeds of change were being sown. As months progressed, the city began to witness tangible improvements. Crime rates started to decline, and relations between the police and the community began to warm. Although DeAndre's efforts were far from flawless, they marked the beginning of a hopeful trend. The public's perception of the police was slowly evolving from one of deep-seated distrust to a cautious optimism, reflecting the slow but steady progress being made. The scandal's aftermath sparked a broader national dialogue on police reform, with DeAndre's case catalyzing discussions about systemic change. His experience became a reference point for other cities grappling with similar issues, encouraging them to reassess their practices and confront their challenges. For DeAndre, the road ahead remained fraught with obstacles and difficulties, but he faced these challenges with renewed determination and resilience. The ordeal had tested his resolve and commitment, but it had also strengthened his dedication to justice and reform. As the city began its journey of healing, DeAndre knew that the path to lasting change would be long and arduous. Yet, with continued vigilance and a steadfast commitment to doing what was right, there was a glimmer of hope for a future where justice and trust could once again flourish. For the first time since joining the force, he felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment, as though he was genuinely embodying the principles that had originally inspired him to become a police officer. The conviction of Barbara marked the end of a tumultuous era fraught with corruption and mistrust. Yet, it also signaled the dawn of a new chapter, filled with the promise of reform and renewal. Although the road ahead would undoubtedly be fraught with challenges, there was a newfound optimism for meaningful, lasting change, especially with leaders like DeAndre and dedicated officers like Lenny at the helm. In the weeks that followed Barbara's conviction, the police department underwent a profound and dramatic transformation. Captain DeAndre Johnson, now firmly entrenched in his leadership role, took decisive action to overhaul the department's practices. The precinct, once a place of routine and sometimes stagnation, buzzed with a renewed sense of purpose as DeAndre convened an all-hands meeting. Officers, who had witnessed the fallout of recent events, filed into the briefing room, their faces reflecting a blend of anticipation and apprehension. At the front of the room stood DeAndre, a figure of strength and resolve, with Lenny by his side. "Officers," DeAndre began, his voice resonating with both authority and empathy, "we stand at a pivotal crossroads. The recent upheaval has exposed deep flaws within our department, but from this crisis emerges a unique opportunity to rebuild from the ground up, to enhance our commitment to justice, and to truly serve and protect every member of our community." DeAndre proceeded to outline his comprehensive reform plan. He proposed mandatory bias training for all officers to address and eliminate prejudiced behaviors, the establishment of a civilian oversight committee to ensure transparency and accountability, the implementation of body cameras for every patrol officer to provide an unvarnished record of interactions, and a strict zero-tolerance policy for any form of discriminatory behavior. As DeAndre spoke, some officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others nodded in agreement, their faces reflecting a mix of hope and skepticism. "I understand that change can be daunting," DeAndre continued, his tone resolute yet reassuring, "but it is essential. We owe it to ourselves, to each other, and to the community we are sworn to protect and serve." As the meeting drew to a close, Lenny found himself surrounded by a throng of fellow officers. Some offered congratulations for his courage and integrity, while others sought guidance on how to navigate the evolving dynamics of the department. Meanwhile, the community's reaction was cautiously optimistic. DeAndre made it a priority to attend town halls, participate in community events, and even join local basketball games, working tirelessly to mend and strengthen the strained relationship between the police force and the public. One evening, as Lenny was wrapping up his patrol, he noticed a familiar face, DeAndre's son, Marcus, playing basketball in a local park. Intrigued, he decided to pull over and step out of his cruiser. "Hey Marcus," Lenny called out with a friendly wave, "mind if I join you for a game?" The boy hesitated for a moment, his initial uncertainty giving way to a smile as he nodded. As Lenny joined the game, other neighborhood kids gathered around, and soon the park was alive with the sounds of laughter and the rhythmic bounce of the basketball. The game quickly transformed into a lively full-court match, with kids and a police officer playing side by side, their camaraderie a symbol of the hopeful, transformative spirit that was beginning to take root in the community. DeAndre arrived at the park to pick up Marcus, a broad smile spreading across his face as he took in the lively scene. The neighborhood basketball game was in full swing, and for a fleeting moment, the burden of his professional responsibilities seemed to lift. Immersed in the simple joy of the game, DeAndre joined in, savoring the camaraderie and the easygoing atmosphere that marked this part of his community. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting a warm glow over the park, DeAndre gathered everyone around. He looked at the diverse group of kids and adults who had come together for this evening's game and spoke with heartfelt sincerity. "This," he said, sweeping his hand across the crowd, "is what community policing looks like. It's about being part of the neighborhood, not just policing it." Lenny, standing nearby, nodded as the realization sank in. This was the very reason he had chosen to become a police officer, not merely to enforce the laws with rigid detachment, but to be an integral and positive presence within the community. Over the following months, the effects of this approach became increasingly evident. Crime rates began to decline, and perhaps more importantly, community satisfaction with the police force saw a marked improvement. While challenges and setbacks remained, the progress was clear and encouraging. A year had passed since the pivotal incident that set this journey into motion. DeAndre found himself standing before the graduating class of the police academy, his demeanor proud and hopeful. In the front row, Lenny, now a respected and decorated officer, observed with a mentor's pride. DeAndre addressed the recruits with a tone of solemnity and hope. "You are entering a noble profession at a critical time," he said. "Your role extends beyond simply enforcing laws. It's about building trust, serving with compassion, and always standing up for what is right, even when it's difficult." As the new officers received their badges, an air of optimism and renewal enveloped the room. The police department had undergone a profound period of self-examination and transformation, emerging with a renewed commitment to integrity, transparency, and community engagement. DeAndre caught Lenny's eye from across the room and offered a knowing nod. They both understood that while much progress had been made, the journey was far from over. A new era of policing was dawning, characterized by a deeper connection to the community and a stronger foundation of accountability. Fast forward 2 years from that pivotal moment, and the police department, under DeAndre's leadership and with officers like Lenny embodying the new ethos, had made considerable advancements in reforming its practices and mending its relationship with the community. Yet the shadow of past events still loomed large, especially as Barbara's appeal hearing approached. The courthouse was a hive of activity, with media crews stationed outside, while the streets were filled with a blend of supporters and protesters, each side passionately voicing their stance on the unfolding case. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, underscoring the ongoing struggle to reconcile past mistakes with present efforts toward reform. Inside the courtroom, DeAndre and Lenny sat resolutely in the gallery, their presence underscoring the gravity of the moment. Barbara Brady, visibly worn and haggard after 2 years of incarceration, was led into the courtroom. The former officer's once self-assured demeanor had been replaced by a wary unease as his eyes scanned the room, reflecting his new reality. His defense attorney launched into arguments for a reduced sentence, emphasizing Barbara's long tenure in the force and portraying him as a victim of a broken system rather than the architect of his downfall. When the prosecution's turn came, they approached the case with unyielding determination. "Your Honor." The prosecutor began with a tone of unrelenting conviction. "Mr. Barbara's actions were far from isolated incidents or merely the consequence of systemic failures. They were calculated abuses of authority that inflicted profound harm and eroded public trust in the very institutions meant to protect and serve." As evidence was meticulously laid out, including heart-wrenching testimonies from individuals whose lives had been irrevocably altered by Barbara's misconduct, families fractured by wrongful arrests, careers devastated by falsified evidence, and a community gripped by fear of those sworn to uphold the law, the full extent of the damage became painfully apparent. Lenny was called to the stand once more, his voice unwavering as he detailed not only the specific incident involving DeAndre, but also other troubling instances of misconduct he had observed during his partnership with Barbara. His testimony painted a broader picture of systemic corruption and abuse within the department. When DeAndre took the stand, he spoke not only from the perspective of a victim, but also as the leader of a department committed to rectifying past injustices. Your Honor, he stated with firm resolve, the harm inflicted by Mr. Barbara extends far beyond individual cases. It has fostered a pervasive culture of mistrust that we are still striving to mend. Our community deserves justice not merely for this one instance, but for the years of systemic abuse that have gone unchecked. As the hearing advanced, it became increasingly evident that the proceedings were about more than just Barbara's culpability. This was a moment of accountability, a declaration that no one, regardless of their position, was above the law. It was a statement that the rule of law would be upheld, especially by those entrusted with enforcing it. After a comprehensive review of all the evidence and testimonies, the judge delivered her decision with a tone of finality. Mr. Barbara, she pronounced, having considered the full scope of evidence and the gravity of the testimony presented, I see no grounds for reducing your sentence. Moreover, in light of the additional evidence brought forward, I am compelled to extend your sentence by 2 years. You will now serve a total of 7 years, with no possibility of parole for the first 5 years. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom as the verdict was read. Barbara Brady, once a figure of defiance, slumped in his chair, the last remnants of his arrogance dissolving into resignation. The weight of the judgment had finally pierced through the veneer of his bravado, leaving him subdued and vulnerable. Outside the courthouse, DeAndre faced the throngs of journalists and concerned citizens gathered in anticipation. With a voice marked by both resolve and compassion, he addressed the crowd. Today, justice has been served, not only for me but for every member of our community who has endured the abuse of power. This verdict is a significant step forward, but let it also serve as a reminder that our journey is far from over. We must remain vigilant, hold ourselves accountable, and strive relentlessly for a system that truly serves and protects all people, regardless of their race, background, or status. As the crowd began to disperse, their murmurs filled with a mix of relief and contemplation, Lenny approached DeAndre, his expression a blend of hope and uncertainty. "Do you think this will make a real difference, sir?" he asked, his voice tinged with a touch of skepticism. DeAndre turned to Lenny, nodding slowly. "It's a start, Lenny. This verdict sends a powerful message that times have changed and that we are committed to doing better. However, real and lasting change comes from our everyday actions, how we engage with the community, and how we uphold the values of justice and integrity in every interaction. It's about the work we do on the streets, in our neighborhoods, and in our hearts." Together they walked toward their patrol car, the weight of the day's events settling in. As they prepared to continue their duties, it was clear that the road to rebuilding trust and ensuring justice was still long and winding. Yet, with each step taken with integrity and each act of courage, they were moving in the right direction. The setting sun cast long, stretching shadows across the city, a poignant reminder that while darkness may persist, the promise of a new day always dawns. It brought with it the hope of justice, redemption, and a better tomorrow, a future where every individual could feel secure and valued. Thank you for joining us on this journey through transformation and hope. As we reflect on the progress made and the challenges faced, we invite you to consider what you have learned from this story. What insights or lessons have resonated with you? Please share one thing you've learned and plan to practice in your own life in the comments below. Your thoughts and experiences help us all grow and inspire positive change. If you like this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more uplifting content. Together, let's continue striving for a better tomorrow.